Gentlemen, the time has come once again to discuss things.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Geeky Gentlemen. I am Sid Part2. Joining me today is...
A geek for fun.
And a geek.
And a geek. A geek for misery.
No, just geek. He's not for anything. He doesn't stand for anything. He's actually a completely neutral party. Because if we didn't have that there, me and Ian's incredibly political differences would just corrupt the show and blow it up from the inside. So
Yeah.
that's why when Steve's not here, me and Ian always have to have a fight afterwards. And after our recent one, he did manage to, as we both pass out, land the final blow and say, "I finally won, Caca Alfie." And he felt really good about himself for that, so I don't want to take that away from him.
Yeah. I'm just going to look at that scoreboard. Oh, 3-0, right. Okay, never mind. Okay, I know this is immediately getting off topic. Like, we haven't even established the topic yet, but, like, I do think it's really funny about how the meme of, like, Vegeta's always trying to catch up to Goku, and yet, like, objectively, he's won every fight they've had. It's just the funniest shit to me. Like, I mean, no, he's won. Goku has certainly been more powerful than Vegeta at several points, but every time they fought, Vegeta's won.
It's like when we were talking about Rush. A win is a win, regardless of technicality.
Yeah, especially like the first one, absolutely demolished.
Oh yeah, Goku gets his ass kicked.
I know, so I don't know. It's a weird one for me. Anyway, like to the point where it seems to have convinced the author that it's never happened, because the joke at the end of the is, "I've finally done it." I'm like, well, no, you've done it before. I don't know what you're talking about. You've done it twice before.
I don't know if that's saying much though. The man literally forgot the title of his show was Super.
Yeah, no, that's true. Anyway, so we're not here tonight to talk about Dragon Ball, though I'm sure it'll come up again. Instead, we're here to talk about a movie that Mr. A Geek for Fun, as opposed to just a geek, picked. So what movie may that be?
The movie we're talking about today is The Shape of Water.
Mm-hmm. Now this, I do have to thank you for picking this, because this has been one of those things that have been kind of like on my radar and I was curious about for a while, but I just never really had the time or the reason to watch it. So I appreciate giving that opportunity. It was pretty funny because I was telling Haley that I was watching this, and she goes, "Oh, yeah, I kind of want to see that." I'm like, literally when it was in theaters, I asked you if you wanted to go, and you said, "Do you know what that movie's about?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And she's like, "I don't want to watch someone fuck a fish dude." It's kind of like it is pretty funny that like the movie is very like infamous or I guess just maybe famous for that aspect, the fact that the woman falls in love with the fucking creature from the Black Lagoon basically is kind of the premise of this film. And in all honesty, it's not even like it's a tiny part of the movie that you can ignore. No, like a lot of the movie revolves around those moments, certainly. But there's maybe a little bit more to it than that. So yeah, that's the general thoughts I have on The Shape of Water. How about you guys?
I love this movie. This movie's fantastic.
Yeah, I really love this as well. This was one of the things where it just wowed me and I wasn't expecting it.
Yeah, I want to, while we're here early on, just kind of set the scene, because at the time, this movie came out and it kind of just took everyone by surprise, because it was really well reviewed. People really like it, but like no one expected it to just kind of sweep awards the way it did. So the fact that this in 2017 won fucking Best Picture, it's so strange. It's such a surreal thing. And the Oscars are funny because people who talk about them will be like, one year, every movie is boring and the Oscars will never learn and they're awful. And then the next year, they do something wild and weird and everyone loves them and they're like, oh, maybe now they'll change their ways. And then the next year, they're boring again. So like 21 was the boring year because Coda won. And then 22 was the exciting year because Everything Everywhere All at Once won. It was the same way with 2016 and 2017 where The Shape of Water winning was like, oh, this is very exciting. But in retrospect, in part probably because of the pandemic, 2017 actually turned out to be like a really important year for American movies because you had The Shape of Water win Best Picture, and that was a big deal on its own. But you had so many other movies come out that year that proved to be like really important for everything going forward. Because that was the year of The Big Sick, that was the year of Lady Bird, that was fucking Jordan Peele's first movie with Get Out, that was Blade Runner 2049. Like, it was the year where everything big about all the movies we watch now happened. And so seeing in the midst of that, you had this Guillermo del Toro resurgence making The Shape of Water, which is probably his first like real all language, all audience success since Pan's Labyrinth, like 10 years before that, was a pretty big deal in that regard. And now that he's coming back around because he got nominated the previous year for Nightmare Alley, which was really good. And then he won Best Animated for Pinocchio this past year. So this turned out to be like a pretty, pun intended, like watershed moment in movies. And I think going back to it, this movie holds up. It's a really good fucking movie, and it's kind of deceptively simple. There's so much about it where you don't realize how smart or how brilliant or like how well crafted everything is until you start digging a little bit below all the obvious stuff. I really, really love this movie.
I really like when she fucks the fish guy. That was kind of...
That's such a good scene. It's such a good scene.
It's a really good scene.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love the way that scene is done. It's fantastic.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, I quite liked it. Alfie, how about you? What made you want to pick it?
Well, I just watched it recently, and it was one of the most interesting things I've seen in a long time. I'm really in a phase right now when I want to like expand my horizons of different movies and stuff I normally wouldn't pick out on my own, because I feel for a long time I kind of like hyper-focused on just my interests, and I feel like I've gone as far with that as any human being could possibly go. So I'm not going to learn anything else new about other stuff, so I want to spread my wings, and this was one of the first things that was shown to me, suggested by my lovely wife Erin, and we watched it, and it was a really, really good time, and it was like a really beautiful movie, and I really like it's got a lot of things going for me just conceptually, where it's a period piece. It's done with incredible practical effects, from suit design and creature makeup and creature performance. It's got really unique POV from all the different characters. Like every character isn't stock. Every character could carry their own individual film, just from what we know about them and stuff as they come together, while the film itself remains very focused on our titular character and the main antagonist. And I think all of that is really, really interesting. And Del Toro has always been a director that whenever I've seen one of his films, I've always really liked them. But I've never watched his whole filmography. So this has been a good chance to kind of literally dip my toes into the water, as it were.
So many water puns.
Exactly, right? So, but no, it really surprised me. I expected it to be a good watch, but I didn't expect it to be so moving and so beautiful. And Del Toro's talked about this because I went and watched a lot of the behind the scenes stuff for this, about like the makings, and he's talked about this, how he wanted to make this a fairy tale type story, a modern fairy tale. The reason why it's a period piece is by making it detached from reality. It's a little easier for people to accept commentary about the current state of affairs when it's not, because we know the moment anyone talks about something on the nose or direct, they're always going to set alarm bells off. We've had our own experience with a period piece story that got a lot of feedback, as you've said, from people for trying to talk about political issues. But it does help kind of get away any biases and get away any kind of preconceptions, and let's just sink yourself in the story in that kind of fairy tale removed from reality way. And it playing on a lot of the B-movie creature features of the time period and looking at that from a modern lens, I think is really, really fascinating. So all of that paired together is really, really good. And the standout for me, for sure, aside from the wonderful work Doug Jones does as the creature and the fantastic stuff done from the actress who plays Liza and all that thing, is I fucking love Michael Shannon in this.
Yes!
This is my favorite Michael Shannon role he's ever done. This is like one of the top tier film villains I've ever seen. I think this is something that should be talked about way, way more for how good in this film he is and just kind of like seamless he is with it. So Michael Shannon's always been an actor I really like, but this was the one where I watched this. I was like, wow, he is acting. He is going crazy in this. So really, really good time, and him specifically stole the show.
I love that you mentioned that anyone in this movie could have their own story, because that's part of the function there, but that's especially the function with Michael Shannon, because the whole point of Michael Shannon's character is that if you actually made this movie in the 50s, he would be the hero.
Yep, 100%. He's the good guy. He's the big, strong, strapping American man that comes in and saves the little lady from the monster. And to turn that on its head and make him the literal villain and just a piece of shit is so fascinating, and especially the way that he's like just a piece of human garbage in ways that are perfectly in line with dudes from the 50s, you know? It's amazing.
Yeah, no, he keeps talking about serving his country. He's reading all of these like self-help books about staying positive and shit, and like he's so 100% like that American insert character that they put in the American cut of Godzilla, if you ever watched that. Like he's that kind of stereotype, but they actually play it for what it is, which is so fucking good. I love that about it. But I also love that all the other side characters have that same sort of level of representing things that you would have seen in other movies like this. So you have Octavia Spencer play like the stereotypical role of a black maid that you would get in old movies like this. But she stands out because her whole function is that her as a marginalized person is literally the voice of this other person that can't talk, and that she actually ends up getting so much more of the dialogue in the movie compared to anyone else. So that helps subvert that a little bit. And then the fact that Richard Jenkins, who plays the painter that she lives next door to, is actually modeled on the director of Creature from the Black Lagoon, who was a gay director who wasn't out at the time, and when he became out, he lost all of his work and basically just moved into a decrepit old little studio. And they Del Toro wanted Ian McKellen to play him, but Ian McKellen was either too busy or doing something else at the time. But even so, I really like that's there. I love the way all of the characters are structured around what you would normally see in a movie like this. And it doesn't like try to be clever about it. It doesn't try to like subvert your expectations of like how monster movies go. It's just moving the perspective so you have sympathy for the right thing. Because at the end of the day, this basically, aside from the fact that she ends up falling into the water with the monster and they're in love, aside from like that little happy ending bit, everything about this movie is exactly the way a monster movie from the 50s would play out. Like nothing about this is different whatsoever.
I mean, I think...
And I kind of love that about it.
I think even her falling in the water and stuff, you wouldn't normally see those kind of endings where like the hero fails kind of thing, but that did happen every so often.
Sure,
so you could kind of, if you want to, you could kind of read it as one of those where it's supposed to be like the tragic ending of those movies subverted. You definitely wouldn't see it in like the 30s and 40s ones, but by the 50s you were starting to get more of those tragic fate ones. The Fly reminds...
the noir influence.
Yeah, The Fly is I think the biggest one that jumps to mind, where you literally end it with help put me in the spider web, you know? Like, that's just such a iconically dark ending to that film, and this is kind of a similar vibe, but just flipped on its head, I guess. But yeah, I like this movie, and yeah, that's, to me, that it's unfortunate and fortunate that we're starting off by talking about Michael Shannon, because yeah, taking the hero from all the other versions of this movie and making him the bad guy is literally the most brilliant thing, and the thing I love the most about it, and I'm not entirely sure how much else I have to say about the movie beyond that one thing. I will say this, since we are being like just overwhelmingly positive about the gate, I will go ahead and go a little bit negative, which I don't know, I'm on the fence about how much of a negative I see this as, but it is something that struck me while watching it. I don't love the relationship that is built up between our main character and the fish monster. Not for the fact that, like, I don't think it could work or that I don't believe the emotions as portrayed by the actors. It's just the movie spends remarkably little time actually developing their connection and romance. You basically get, like, a really short montage of it after, like, one or two establishing scenes. And that kind of, like, undercut it for me in a number of ways. It just didn't feel like as well-rounded as a lot of the other dynamics and character interactions did in this movie. And you know, one of you mentioned it's kind of got like a fairy tale vibe to it, and I think that certainly is there, and it helps that. But I don't know, I would have liked, I guess, more scenes of her interacting and their relationship developing before she breaks him out than, like, the spy intrigue stuff. Those scenes, while interesting and appropriately tense, felt like a distraction from the thing that was much more unique about this film. So it's kind of a criticism I have. I'm not sure how you guys feel about it.
I can understand that in the sense of I can agree with you that if I had to choose between do I want more of those scenes or those scenes, I definitely would pick more of Lysa with the Amphibian Man. I think that would be more interesting just in general. But I don't agree with I don't think it needs any more that we've shown. I actually appreciate how well paced this film is that we don't spend any more time than we need to get something. So once you understand her character and how ostracized she feels from everyone else and how everyone else kind of interacts with her differently, the moment you get a different interaction with the creature, and the fact that the creature can't speak or communicate in any way other than gestures and glances, and just kind of that very like fine line between something that's sentient and something that's a lot more animalistic, I think gives it more emotional weight because it makes it purer. It makes her, when she has that great scene where she's trying her best to get her emotions out with the sign language, and we get the interpreter from her friend, and he goes and then gives the line of just like, he looks at me and he just sees me for me. It's like, that's all I need. I don't need.
Nope. Apparently Alfie doesn't need to talk anymore. That's what he doesn't need.
Oh no! He was on a roll.
He was spitting. He was showing Ian all the wrongness he had. Oh well. This is what happens when you disagree with the god Sid Part 2. You lose your fucking voice. I hope you sympathize with this character now. A geek for fun. You fuck.
While we wait for him, I'll jump on there, and I say I'll agree with Alfie. I do think the movie, as it's designed, I think really works, because I think part of the beauty of the movie is there's oh, there you are.
Go ahead, yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. Were you done?
Yeah, I was basically, you've got something to say.
Okay, cool. I didn't want to cut you off there. Well, I guess your internet cut you off there, but that's fine.
Sorry.
No, you're good. No, what I was going to say was, I agree, because I think the beauty about the romance in this movie is this is such a well put together movie all the way through, where it's paced really well, the actors are doing a really good job, and so much is being communicated on terms of she can't talk to him with words, but she's signing to him and she's talking him through meaning, and their relationship is founded just on that very basic act of she's the only one that shows him kindness, that she gives him food to eat, that she's thinking about him, and that his captivity and the way that he completely lacks any ability to communicate is such a pure distillation of how she feels in the world, and that's why she loves him. So like all of that being just so laid bare, I think works really well because it's so simple and so clear. But the other bit of it is just the way the film is shot and designed, how you turn it into like this big sweeping romantic epic with all of the montages of them sitting by his pool and her bringing the eggs for him, and how he reacts when he first gets one and he's scared and he like has that like hissing voice, and she's never afraid of him at any point, that she never feels like she's afraid of him. They never play that beat of he hurts her by accident and that he has to apologize to her for it, even though they do that beat later. And even though they do it with the old guy, he's never mad at him. He's never even like, that thing's a monster, he bit off my cat's head. He's distrustful of the idea that this thing can communicate before he meets him. But the second he sees him, he's just completely sympathetic to him. And I think all of that really helps make that romance work even more, because at the end of the day, the romance is just wrapping on a bow, making very literal all of the emotions that we're already talking about, which is how do you allow yourself to empathize with people that you don't feel you're similar to, or people that you feel like you can't communicate to? How do you give voice and empathy to other things that don't have the same voice and the same level of empathy? And I think all of that comes through in that love story really well. At the end of the day, it's kind of like a murder mystery, where the least important thing about a murder mystery is who did it, because the movie is always going, or the story is always going to be about what does attempting to solve the murder say about everyone involved. And I think it's the same thing with the love story, where at the end of the day, that they are in love is the least important thing, when instead the most important is how does her love for the amphibian man circle all of the characters around her story. And when all of that is so good, I think it does a perfect job of giving you just enough of that romance to make the rest of it work.
I mean, I think that might be just a case of your mileage may vary. Because for me, that was the thing that felt like it, I don't know if it needed the most justification, but the thing that makes it stand out the most from everything else. Because we've done this story before, right? Where there's the captive creature and the person who would normally be the hero in another movie is now portrayed as the villain. The thing that is wholly unique to this, or not, probably not wholly, but on this scale, on this budget, on this prestige, unique to this, is the fact that she falls in love with it, and it's not like a charming vampire or something that can be beautiful. You know, it's this is a far cry from Bella and Edward, let's just say. The innate monstrosity and non-humanness of the amphibian man is just a very big, very blatant part of the film. And so to spend a very select amount of the time not showing how that romance and that dynamic develops, and instead focusing on other things, feels like not necessarily a bad choice, but certainly a deliberate choice that I think pays off, obviously, well enough, since this fucking movie won Best Picture. I've not really heard anyone talk shit about it. But at least for me, in my personal viewing of the film, just made me feel like I was wanting something that it just didn't get to explore as much as I'd hoped. Because to me, that seems like just the more interesting and again, unique part of the film that, like, nothing else quite touches, at least nothing in memory.
I think, and I'll just say this real quick, I think the other thing about the monster or the amphibian man or the water creature or whatever. The other thing about it is because it's aping on so many monster movies of the 40s and 50s, particularly Creature from the Black Lagoon, but other sci-fi ones too, like Invasion of the Body Snatchers. In all of those older movies, the monster is always Russia and communism. Like that's always the metaphor. Is always at the end of the day, the Russians are coming and they're going to take away your individuality, and there are bolts and they're machines and they're godless, and we need the all-American Boy Scout to stop them. And so I think in keeping with that spirit, in most of those movies, the monster's perspective on it isn't particularly well explored because the idea is just that it's the other, it's bad, we need to destroy it, it's the communists. And so doing that here, where the monster isn't the evil communism, it's the ideology that regardless of what or who he is entitled to love, and I'm going to love him anyway. I think that level of it works too, that at the end of the day, all monsters in old monster movies are empty vessels for an ideology. And in this movie, that ideology is you should love and care about people. And so if he's just an empty vessel for that stuff, I think that's completely fine for me.
I also, you made a point earlier, Ian, about like comparing it to like the vampire, right? In terms of like the stereotypical illusion of beauty and the kind of object of desire with these monster things. I think the closer comparison, and something I think the filmmakers were very aware of, and like when they designed this version of the creature, is that it's closer to something like Beauty and the Beast, where the most common criticism from a large majority of the female fan base is he was hotter as the Beast, you know? Like, so like,
okay. Can I interrupt you for just a minute, because I don't know when else I'm going to talk about this. So the other day at work, and this was like a conversation that sprung up at work that caused like a meeting of, you can't talk about stuff that makes people uncomfortable, and it was like very, very like beyond the pale. But the beginnings of the conversation were talking about Beast and what a downgrade he became as Adam. I want to stress, I was not involved in the conversation. I was just listening to it happen. Talking about Beast and how he was not as hot, or he was hotter before he became Adam. And then the conversation between two women was, do you think it was knotted? Oh yeah, definitely. Man, what a downgrade.
Good for them.
I know, right?
Damn.
Like they have basically what you're describing. It is a scene in this movie where they talk about like how does it work, and clearly it works pretty well because she's got a big fucking smile on her face. So I think you kind of understand. I think the creators were very aware of like, you can look at this creature, and when they sculpt him, he's very fucking they make his mannerisms and stuff. The fact that he doesn't speak and has that kind of like docile nature to him, while being very strong and lean. He's not very big or wide, but he's very lithe. Are a lot of features, and like he's got like his lips are very pronounced, his eyes are very pronounced. All his features are designed to invoke a sense of beauty. He's very much still a monster, but something I really think the design team of this did really well, and why it's so... This is one of the best advocates I've ever seen for why you could not make this movie with a CGI creature. This had to be a practical guy in a suit, and the suit had to look as good as it does. Because there are moments in this where like I thought that was CGI, you know, like when he starts glowing, I was like, oh, the digital adds in. That's UV paint in the suit. It just reacts to different forms of light when they shot. It's all in camera. So it literally grew in those lights in the scene. And I think all of that goes to give it this effect of, this is a different form of beauty. And despite being not very familiar with his works, I've listened to what he's talked about. And Del Toro is always really big about that, and always really trying to show different expressions of that and different expressions of the human form and what we can appreciate and how we can fall in love with this. So I would be shocked if you did a poll of every male presenting character in this movie and you got women to do it if the creature didn't win. as the hottest guy. God, ironically, like I don't think it's that far fetched. I think it is definitely different, but I think it's exploring sexuality and the intrigues behind that in a way you don't normally get to see. And I really praise it for that, because I think that's very interesting to do and something you can only do by doing the creature feature way, by having it be a guy in a suit, by having it be Doug Jones acting it.
And being really deliberate, too, about all of the other considerations around the movie that allow you to feel empathy for the creature, because the practical effects and the makeup are one thing, but Del Toro was also like halfway to making this entire movie in black and white. And I don't think it works anywhere near as well if it's in black and white, because so much of the emotion of this movie is in the lighting work and in the color choices, and the fact that he's glowing blue in certain scenes. So the fact that he's glowing in certain scenes, everything has that sort of vintage aesthetic to it, without ever making the movie feel nostalgic, which I think black and white would have a tendency to do. I think is really important to it. And then just preserving the black and white for that one really minor section where she's getting ready to say goodbye to the creature because she's going to send him into the water, and it transitions into her basically doing her little Hollywood song number and reducing all of this down into like a simple black and white playful expression of love that you can only have in the movies. I think all of that is really adding to what makes that creature so worth empathizing with and so easy to fall in love with, because it is very literally a case of the entire world is built around falling in love with the way that thing looks.
I mean, fair enough. Again, my problem isn't with empathizing with the creature. My problem isn't with the design. Alfie, I completely agree with you. I think it checks all those boxes. My problem is just I wanted to spend more time seeing that relationship develop than what we got. I don't say that I don't buy the relationship. I just think that there's very precious little of it developing, and a lot of the movie spends time with things that I just fundamentally find less interesting than that aspect. You bring up Beauty and the Beast, right? And that's like a very apt, and you're 100% right. That is definitely the vibe they're going for. But Beauty and the Beast is often about the development of their relationship together. That's the thing that is mostly spent time on in those films or in adaptations of that story. So I don't really think I'm gonna sway you guys. I don't think anything you guys have said is anything I actually disagree with. I just think that this is just a difference of opinion in what you would like to see in a movie like this, or what you would like to see from this film itself. So if that's all cool with you, we can just go ahead and move on and talk about something else, like the fact that it's teal.
It do be teal. I'm with you on that. I think it was an interesting springboard to bring up some of these points anyway, and so you're all good. I think it was a good topic to go down to bring in some of those other references we were going for. In terms of outside of the main things with the creature and the main protagonist and their relationship and the stuff with a villain, how do we feel? Because this film takes, and a lot of older movies seem to do this, and I wonder if there's inspiration to it. And like, how do you guys feel about it? It's like there's like subplots in this, and man, in these day and age where those subplots would now get reduced to like, the MCU version of this is the illustrators like painting not going through, and the guy like calling him like when he tries to flirt with the waiter, and he goes on a whole tirade, and then he's awful to when the black people come in. That would be the end credit scene these days. You would get that in the main movie itself. Like, what did you guys think about all of that, and the fact that we would take these tiny little diversions to flesh out some of those supporting cast? If it was compelling, or Ian, is that more so? Because you mentioned the spy stuff there as well. It kind of falls into that bracket. Do you think that was like taking away time from the main thing you wanted to say?
I liked the scene in the diner. I liked everything with her friend that like he had the washed up career because of his homosexuality. I liked that stuff a lot because again the like conspiring they wouldn't make a character openly homosexual, but they'd queer code a character for movies like this in that day, right? So normally a character like that would be either some kind of spy or like the effeminate, like human villain of the movie that wants to capture the creature and like sees the creature as beautiful and has his own nefarious plans for it that are against what the good right-hearted American would want. And those characters would often be like queer coded, right? So I thought that was very interesting and added to the film and the commentary and stuff. And I like the way that his relationship works with the creature, because again, that trope of that character that's assisting in trying to break the creature out or whatever would usually be like the scene where he gets injured. That's where he'd get like his comeuppance, right? That's the kind of vibe you'd get in those old movies, where the effeminate betrayer character like tries to see the creature as more than the ungodly monster it is, and then gets their comeuppance and gets injured or killed or whatever by in his hubris, kind of thing. So I liked all that stuff. The spy stuff, okay, so maybe this is just me and the way I watch this movie, and I never know why this happens to me. It's such a common thing, and I think Steve will laugh when I say it. I don't know why, whenever I watch a movie where there's like scenes in a foreign language, and for whatever reason, it doesn't feel the need to put subtitles in at that moment for me. So like, all the scenes where the dude's speaking in Russian to the spies and stuff, one of them I managed to turn on subtitles for like 2 seconds before it was over, and I got like 3 lines of dialogue. But it's just funny because, and just one caveat, I did not watch this illegally. I bought it off of YouTube or rented it off YouTube, and it just didn't feel the need to put subtitles in those scenes. So it's kind of a weird thing to watch, but like, I got the intention behind the scene. It's an interesting film watching experience to watch a film where the language switches and you just kind of go off the tone and the vibe to tell what's going on. And so maybe I would have liked those scenes more had I like fully comprehended everything that was being said. But I don't really feel like I needed to. Like, I got it, Like, there's the scientist guy, and he's in this situation where he's playing both sides, but he's clearly not actually comfortable with either of them. And he's, like, actually just as under threat from the Russians as he is from the Americans on this side of things. He's got his own game that he's playing. And there's tension in those scenes. And I thought that was, like, interesting enough. But again, just not the part of the movie I wish we'd focused on as much as we did.
I like the subplots a lot. I think part of what makes them work for me is that the movie doesn't feel the need to do what we would do now, not necessarily in the MCU way of like making them post-credit scenes or like spin-off TV shows or something. But in the way that like we've gotten to this point in movie making and movie criticism where we've just like turned the plot into some abstract fetish like thing where like it just seems to turn people on when all of the boxes get checked, and you can be like, oh, if you go back to this scene, it's setting up this thing, and it's all a domino effect, and quality gets confused for plot making coherent linear sense. And I think that's just the most base boring way to talk about movies ever. And so in this movie, what I appreciate about the subplots is they're not there to like create a cascading effect that leads to the conclusion. They're just there to flesh out the commentary of the movie, that you need to take time to understand the Russian spy and where his motivations come from in terms of wanting to help the creature, and how he feels, like you said, under threat both by the Russians and the Americans, and how in both of those conversations, they're entirely oriented around the other person. The Russians don't want the Americans to learn anything, and the Americans just want to get ahead of the Russians. So they're not really thinking about the end goal in either sense. They're just trying to get over on the other guy. And in a monster movie, when monsters are always metaphors for others and it's always an us versus them thing, in that scene or in those moments, you have that perfect distillation of both sides always just think it's us versus them. Them is always someone else, depending on where you're situated like that. And so getting a chance to like put him square in the middle of that and make him not just an opportunist, but a person that like realizes he's kind of hanging out in the middle of, there's not any room for him, because just like Sally Hawkins' character cares about the monster for no gain of her own, she just loves the creature. He too has that same sort of drive, except for him it's science and it's discovery, and it's the Soviets aren't interested in science, the Americans aren't interested in science, they're just interested in beating the other person. The other character, Giles, the gay best friend, I want to talk about him for a minute because I really love that scene where he's in the bar, or not in the bar, but like in that pie shop, which is such a weird thing. I didn't realize that used to be a thing. So he's in the shop that apparently only, and he's getting his pie, and he talks to the waiter, and like they have a good back and forth, and then they get that implication that he's gay, where he touches his hand, and the dude freaks out.
This is a family restaurant.
So that character,
that was a good line delivery. I like that guy.
It really was. I love how he does that, and then without missing a beat, like goes into the black family trying to come in, and like it's such a good transition. But that character is based on James Whale, who was the director of a bunch of classic monster movies, who was also gay. So he made Bride of Frankenstein, he made Creature from the Black Lagoon, he made the original Frankenstein, The Invisible Man, like all of those classic monster movies that we watched from the 1930s and 40s. That was him. And there's a lot of contention around his life and his career, because in biographies about him, there are a lot of people that say that he basically did everything except stop short of telling you he was gay. So like he was a very open person, and his nickname was the Queen of Hollywood. So there was this idea of him for a lot of people that like, no, everyone knew he was gay, we just pretended like we didn't see it. And his own partner always resisted the idea that his movies were like metaphors for coming out, that really the monster was homophobia. And there's a lot of like modernly scholarly work about like, are all monster movies just secretly about repressed homosexuality? And so his partner said, no, that was never the case. It was never the idea that like Frankenstein is a gay metaphor or Bride of Frankenstein's a gay metaphor, because he was not the type of person to hide that at all. Like he was apparently very, very open. And then there are other conflicting accounts that say, no, it's the opposite, that he did actually lose his career towards the end of his life because he was gay, and that he did actually work really hard to try and do as much subversive work in those movies as possible, which is why movies like The Bride of Frankenstein, or even for their time, like really campy and subversive, because they're going back and forth between a more complicated sexuality than you would normally see in old school monster movies. So that guy becomes the basis of Giles in this movie. And I like that they don't feel the need to basically make him the co-lead of the movie, because I think the trouble you run into with basing him on a real person is that dude's life is fascinating and his career is fascinating. And you could literally just make an entire movie about the life and death of James Whale in monster movies, and whether or not monsters are metaphors for sexuality or not. There's so much meat to that idea, pun intended. So when we go to him here, and he is really just this epitome of just pure empathy, of the idea that like he's not going to question her falling in love with a fishman. Like he doesn't question anyone falling in love with anyone. He simply cares about people, and he cares about their relationship. I thought all of that was really, really good, and I like that you get that wake up call moment where like he slips up and assumes the other person in the restaurant is gay when he's not. And when the dude turns out to be a bigot, he just immediately pulls back, and he sees what love actually is, which is that relationship Sally Hawkins has to the amphibian man. I think all of that stuff is done really, really well. I love it. I think that guy does a really great job. It's a shame that Ian McKellen wasn't able to be in this movie to play that role, because I feel like Ian McKellen would have fucking crushed it. But I think maybe you would have had the bigger problem of maybe it's because it's Ian McKellen, that he's so big that you would have a hard time believing it was it would have taken away from the fairy tale of the movie to cast an actor that is just that well known. So maybe it works in its favor. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think the situation definitely isn't like a net loss, which is the fact that it can pull that off at all, where anything else is like, oh, you didn't get Ian McKellen. It's like objectively the movie's worse for this now. Like, it's just the fact that you can have an argument like, well, maybe it did kind of work out for the best. I think is definitely the movie's favor for making that work, because that is a feat being able to say that.
Yeah, you know, I'm not a.
Yeah, I don't know. It would have been interesting to see what else Ian McKellen would have done with it. I don't know if he would have shaved his head for the role. I don't know.
That would have been interesting. Not gonna lie.
Yeah. No, you know what I like? I like that the guy's like, it's a monster. It's not, he shouldn't be alive, kind of thing. Too. Oh, this thing cured my baldness. I really like it now. Relatable character. Totally understand. No, we gotta keep him around.
The anti-Lex Luthor.
I know, right? This guy.
The end of All Star Superman is just the.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just gives him his hair and he's good now.
Problem solved. Who needs a gravity gun?
Yeah. The fact that Michael Shannon played Zod and not Lex Luthor really ruins the chance for the joke here. God damn it.
Honestly, that was something I was going for, and Aaron knows this. Like the whole time I was watching, it's like, man, I'm getting some real fucking Lex vibes from this thing here. Like, it kind of made me annoyed in retrospect that, like, man, he's a great Zod, but he pulls out some killer, like, Lex Luthor-esque lines in here where I forget the exact wording of it because it's been like 2 weeks since I've seen the film. But like it's the scene where he's like first describing like, that is it, and we are, and that thing isn't one of, like, do you understand?
We
kind
were
of
made
thing?
in God's image, and that thing isn't. Yep.
Oh, that's
yeah,
a good moment.
that whole thing, I was like, damn, I'm stealing that. That's good. That's good stuff. I really like, and again, it wouldn't fit every version, but like the specific time period and everything he goes on. The hardest scene I've seen in a long ass time is the fact this man kept his rotting finger, and I know from this character's mind he kept that there because he knew, man, there's gonna be a moment where I could rip this off, and it's gonna look crazy fucking intimidating. The fact that I'm this hardcore, so I'm gonna save it, because the moment that shit gets like that rotting, it's going off immediately. But the thing, he knew he kept it there because he's like, nah, this will be cool. This will be really, really cool if I just do this. And he goes in there intimidating. And what I really like his performance is, I don't see it a lot of intimidating things, but it always fascinates me when an actor can really do this. Is Matt Smith's really good at doing this, and Peter Capaldi's really good at doing this, is being able to go from 0 to 100, and then the key is being able to then go back to 0 seamlessly. Mm-hmm. Is being able to do that in the same sentence. It takes so much skill to be believable and to keep that energy and to keep that character consistent. Very rarely do I see it, but when he goes mad, he starts out very calm and he just rises for a bit and then immediately back down to calm, back down to very mannered way of speaking and almost very monotone. Is like, that's like crack to me. I love it when an actor can do that. It's like the craziest thing in the world. So all that stuff when he gets to go like that I adore it, and I love how the Toro writes and I love the ferocity of him. Every time he's on screen, he's always so intimidating, but he's also got that mix of he's very pathetic and feeble and at the whims of other people's powers. He has no control of his life, and it's very much that the ultimate 60s dad with a pipe in the chair energy, and just putting that motherfucker through the ringer as crazy as possible. And I adore everything to do with it. It's one of my absolute all-time favorite performances I've ever seen, and it shocked me the first time I saw it because I always knew he was really good, but I didn't know he was that guy. I didn't know he was that dude.
He was him. Yeah, no, Shannon's performance is absolutely jaw dropping for me. I think the scene that stands out the most to me is, again, just the way that his character is written to be so menacing, but it's just all changed in the direction from what you would just see of this kind of movie. So the scene where he's trying to seduce our main character, whose name keeps escaping me, the scene where he's trying to seduce our main character by like making light of her disability and like proclaiming his sexual prowess. I'll make you howl, or whatever the fuck it is he says. I'll make you moan, or whatever, is just, it's so creepy and wrong and like ew, but at the same time, you know what? I'm watching, or have been watching. I'm starting to get a little bit out of it, thank fucking God. But I'm going through classic Doctor Who right now, and you know, I love Doctor Who, but it's still a product of its time, and like constantly. And so I'm going through episodes made in the 60s or 70s, and just, my God, the fucking, how tired I get of, oh, a little lady like you can't have that, or you have like the opinionated, smart scientist woman gets put in her place by like the respectable, level-headed white man, and then she falls in love with him by the end of the story. There's a John Pertwee episode that's like that. It's called, the story's called Inferno, and like clearly the character's in the wrong to be supporting this fucking mad scientist type, but there's just like this fucking oil drilling experts there and keeps telling her stuff and talking her down, and then, you know, she's butting heads with him the whole time, and then fucking what happens at the end of that story? Oh, they went off together. Yay, what a happy ending. No! Those two are horrible for each other. Why do stories do this? So to have that, like, that archetype, that, again, this is where this movie would have gone if it was made back in the 50s, as to have that played off with and gone in the opposite direction, and have that same type of scene be played as, like, creepy and wrong is just so good, so good.
He is absolutely fantastic in this. People have a tendency to forget that Michael Shannon is a great actor because he hasn't done anything lately where he's like the standout. Like, he's great in Knives Out, but he's like the butt of the joke in Knives Out. And like he shows up here in other things, like he's going to be Flash. He's going to be General Zod in Flash, and like he's in Man of Steel, but like the Zod stuff in that movie doesn't feel like it's enough in the forefront to warrant what he does there. And like, he played Elvis once in like 2016, and that wasn't particularly good. So there's a lot of great stuff out there on Michael Shannon, but it gets buried in all the stuff he's done just for a paycheck. And he is so fucking good in this. I love the scene when Sally Hawkins is basically signing "fuck you" to him, and he loses his fucking shit. That's such a good moment, and that level of eruption is great. But then later, when he's killing the Russian spy, and he's trying to interrogate him, and he's just failing miserably. Like, the idea that this dude can be so full of rage and so lacks so much control, and every time he's mad, I love it so much. It's so good. He's perfectly menacing, but he's also like never got all of the cards ever. He's always someone's lackey at some point, or someone is holding something over his head at every point in the story, and he's always reading those motivational books, and he's always trying to psych himself into a situation where he has actual power, but he never really does. He's always just behind someone. Mm-hmm. And at the end there, when they basically just accept that the amphibian man's like a fucking god, and like the way he delivers that line, like he believes it, but he doesn't fucking give a shit, that he is not convinced of it, and he just gets his throat slit. That's so good. I adore it. That's probably the closest this went more towards like like traditional monster movie archetype, where like in a lot of old monster movies you'd have at least the one person who kind of like hypes up the monster as something something satanic or devilly or like godly, and then the monster just like proves how savage it is and it like murders the person. Making it Michael Shannon and having Michael Shannon get his throat. Very, very happy with that choice. That was a lot of fun. I enjoyed the hell out of that. But Michael Shannon is great in this. Everyone in this movie does a killer job. I don't think there's really a weak link anywhere in the cast. And again, it sort of helps to how efficiently paced this movie is, where it feels like everyone's got their little cul-de-sac. Everyone's kind of got their scene-stealing moment. Even the bigoted restaurant guy, the first scene you see him in before the bigoted stuff, when he's in the restaurant with both Sally Hawkins and Giles, he's very charming. He's fun. They have that conversation about the fun Southern accent. So like everyone in this movie, I feel like gets just enough screen time to be memorable without ever feeling like they're overstaying their welcome.
Can we talk about my favorite joke in the movie? Where he kicks the black couple out of the restaurant and then says, "Y'all come back now here." That's so good. It's just really fucking funny. I don't know why that made me laugh so hard when it happened. When I was like, God, that's good. Get out. You can order to go, but you can't sit at the bar. That's reserved. Get out of here. Y'all come back now, you hear?
Y'all come back.
This movie sort of has a weird spot in Del Toro's filmography, because I don't know if it breaks like my top 3 or 4. But it's one of those like standout pieces where I'm like, I understand why this one is the one with all. I understand why this is the one that everyone likes, because it's definitely a lot like Blade 2 and Hellboy. This is his crowd pleaser movie, right? Like, this is Pacific Rim. This is like this is a movie that like has all of the hallmarks and bells and whistles of a Del Toro movie, but it's also like perfectly digestible to everyone that has never seen a Del Toro movie before. It's just subversive enough because it's got the fish fucking, but it's also just family friendly enough. So it's in that like weird middle spot. So like it's nowhere near as fucked up as Crimson Peak, or Nightmare Alley, or Pan's Labyrinth. So it's hard to like put it above those, but because it has like that cross demographic appeal, I almost feels like it warrants to be higher up, because that's a hard thing to do, to be like, this is everything that I'm famous for and I've made my niche for, and I'm gonna do it in a way that's both recognizable and connects to everyone. Because it didn't work out for him with Nightmare Alley, and it didn't work out for him with Pan's Labyrinth at first. So like that kind of thing is.
You cut off there right at the end, Steve. What were you saying?
I just said like it's respectable to make this work the way he did for everybody.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think that this is just one of the more like engaging Del Toro movies I've watched, because even like some of the movies that he's done that are like supposed to be more wide appeal audience pleasers, I've seen them and I'm like, yeah, I get the artistry, and I think Del Toro's like a really cool guy, but I don't actually love a lot of his movies. Like both the Hellboy movies, I don't know if boring's the right word, but they're not engaging. Like, I liked some of the ideas and stuff in his new Pinocchio, but sometimes I think the weirdness of Del Toro as his like signature maybe gets a bit lost in itself. This, however, was a movie that like I can definitely tell that it's him going into it, but if I would have seen it like somehow in isolation, I don't know if I would have been able to just as easily pick it out. You know, this feels just a little bit more by numbers somewhat than Del Toro normally does, if that makes sense.
I can't comment. I don't know.
Okay. Did you watch either of the Hellboy movies or anything, Alfie?
No, I haven't seen any Hellboy films.
Pacific Rim?
I haven't seen Pacific Rim either.
Jesus Christ.
You saw Nightmare Alley though.
I did see Nightmare Alley. I really liked that one. I wouldn't call that one a cloud freezer though.
Yeah, no.
It was a really good film though. I enjoyed that.
Yeah, no, I love Nightmare Alley. But no, I mean, I get what you're saying there. Yeah, and I mean, I think that sort of goes to the artistry there, where he's doing something that feels different enough that it's going to appeal to people that aren't instantly in love with his style, while still keeping some of those beats and some of those features in there. I mean, like Doug Jones being a holdover from playing Abe Sapien, one Fishman that people love, to now playing this Fishman that everyone loves, is something there. But I mean,
still
with Del Toro,
surprised that no one, for some reason, including himself, David Hyde Pierce, does not feel the need to get credited for Abe Sapien. It's like, oh, I just did the voice. Doug Jones did all the real work. I'm like, then why didn't Doug Jones just do the voice? Like, I'm so confused.
So Del Toro's filmography has always been like, clearly this guy read Frankenstein when he was very, very young, and he just made it his personality. Because everything he's ever done is like the horrors of mad scientum, the horrors of playing God with existence, the beauty of monsters, the way that monsters can reveal more to us about being human. Like, that's every fucking movie he's ever made. So all of that is there. I think in the wheelhouse of Del Toro, I like his Pinocchio, Nightmare Alley, Crimson Peak, and Hellboy 2, maybe more than I like The Shape of Water. But that really just speaks to how good all of those movies are, and not to the quality of Shape of Water, because I do think all of those movies are just stellar movies. So it's hard to like put anything above anything else. The only reason I put Shape of Water lower than them is that I think those other movies are when Del Toro doesn't fucking care who's watching the movie. He's just making his movie. And whereas this, I think he is a little bit more careful and he is a little bit more restrained. People were really fucking pissed about Crimson Peak, because Crimson Peak was advertised as like this horror movie. And it's actually just a sad gothic romance that opens several times with the line that this is not a ghost story. So everyone got set up for a ghost story. The movie tells you it's not a ghost story and becomes something very different, and people were very mad about it. But Crimson Peak and Shape of Water have a lot of things in common. Crimson Peak is just way more balls to the wall Del Toro than this is.
Interesting.
I'll have to check it out. It sounds interesting.
It's got what's his face? It's got what the fuck? Tom Hiddleston. It's got Tom Hiddleston and Jessica Chastain. It's super fucking good. I love that movie.
Neat. I'm not sure if I really have much else to say about this movie. We've kind of talked about just about everything I can think of to talk about with this. And of course, I say that and like we'll hang up. I'm like, I should have mentioned this thing, but I don't know. I think we checked all the boxes on this one, for me at least. Did you guys have anything else? Any other remaining scenes or thoughts you really wanted to get into on this one?
Not particularly. I think the main thing I want to make sure I say, I want to make sure I get her name right so I can give her full credit, is Sally Hawkins, who plays Eliza.
She's
the main,
so good.
her being able to get across that performance entirely just through sign language. We get that one little scene which transitions into like the musical little bit where she gets to finally like kind of express her thoughts and feelings and stuff. And I really like how that's shot with the contrast then of the reality that she's stuck in and kind of what she wishes she could express, and the futility of that, and also kind of the beauty of that of you can never really pass those feelings on to someone else, no matter how close you are to someone. There's always going to be something that's just internal with you when you're trying to express love and freedom like that. For the majority of the film, her just being able to convey every single one of her feelings without a single line of dialogue and the other members of the cast being able to pitch in with that, and how it's written to accommodate for that, so you're never left wondering what she's saying. I think all of that is really, 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 really smart and really, 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 really well done. And I'd be curious to hear the thoughts of any deaf people who would watch this film and how that comes across from them, because I'd be fascinated by it to learn from that.
The only last little thing I'll say is that I mentioned at the start of this that 2017 turned out to be a really important year for movies, and this won Best Picture, but that year was fucking stacked. Even just some of the other Best Picture nominees that year were fucking Get Out, Dunkirk, Lady Bird, Phantom Thread, 3 Billboards. Movies that weren't even nominated for Best Picture at that point were Blade Runner 2049, I, Tonya. It was such a stacked fucking year for good movies. Logan came out that year. So the fact that it just kind of shows up on top
another
of a
good
whole
movie. You just keep naming all these shitty movies. I don't know what you're going on about, Steve.
All right. I will personally retract all of my statements if you can tell me that you've seen every single one of those movies.
That I've not seen every single one of those movies?
No, that you have seen every single one of those movies. Tell me you've seen every single one.
No, I don't watch bad movies.
all right. But no, it was just one of those years where you went to the theater and every week there was something good to watch. So coming out on top in that kind of year is really remarkable on its own. It's also beautifully ironic that it's the same year as the Beauty and the Beast live action remake that Ian McKellen is actually in. So comparing and contrasting those two.
God, that movie sucks.
I know, but imagine being I saw Beauty and the Beast and then I saw which one was the better Beauty and the Beast. It wasn't Beauty and the Beast.
I don't know.
But yeah, no, stacked fucking year. Last Jedi, War for the Planet of the Apes, Baby Driver, holy fucking shit, man. Every movie I'm naming is in the best movies of the decade.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
But yeah, that's all I have.
Okay.
That's what we got. Yeah, I think we feel that we've run the gambit of most things to talk about with this one.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna take the next pick then. I've got just something that's been kind of kicking around in my head, so we're gonna do discussion topic, and I want to talk about branding as it applies to social media. The idea that if you're a social media, if you have a social media, if you're a content creator, then you have to associate a very particular brand and just the restrictions that creates and yada yada yada. It's just something that I find interesting as this this avenue of career paths and just new personalities and everything exists and propagates and just what that's turning into. So it should be hopefully an interesting discussion. I don't know, maybe depressing.
I need a shot first.
Okay. Yeah. So we'll see how that goes. But until next time, everyone, I'm the philosopher.
And I am the geek for monster fuckers because Matt's not here.
I'll fuck anything, but not.
And we are your geeky gentlemen, and we will be discussing things.